Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're watching the hockey game tonight, I just got one thing for you guys right now. Right there, baby. Yeah. What a game. What a game. Best hockey game I've seen in a long time. Not just because Canada won, but wow, what a game. David Hooper is here. We're going to talk about tracking UFOs. Do we have the science to do it? We're going to get into a lot of cool conversation with him coming up. And coming up as well, we have each and every one of you here, starting with Race Fan in the gold medal position, SJ in the silver, Kitty Caddywhack in the bronze medal tonight, Attorney at Large, Michael Morris, how you doing? Robert Lamoth, Chris 716, Tuxed Mufon, Road Flare, Bar Madison, how y'all doing? Hi, Karen and the Woo Train and Fabster, Eternity Eternal and Fast Hemi. Thank you for coming on in. Ethanol and Mel WD-40 is here. Mel will be lubing us up for tonight's show because you always want to go into a show nice and smooth. Yeah, you want to go into smooth. You don't want any of that rigidness when you're talking UFOs. Never. Chill Farm, how you doing? Wee Runa, nice to see you. Frankie B and yeah, there you go, little Timmy James. I know you were cheering. I got your messages. Gory Tiger is here. Gory Tiger will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the left of the studio, if you don't mind, to the left of the studio. Scrolling on down as we continue with our roll call. Mama Catherine. I love you, Mama Catherine. I hope you had a wonderful day. And thank you very much for your text messages this morning. I appreciate it so much. S. Vermette is here. S. Vermette will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio, if you don't mind, to the right of the studio. Let's see. Who else we got? Lee the Bee, thank you for joining us. And JSCO, good to see you. Renee Cruz, thanks for coming on in as we continue on with our roll call tonight. Jeff Swenson, Human Carl is here. Human Carl is a great veteran of the United States Air Force. Thank you for your service, Human Carl. We love you. Number 23 in your program, starting at center ice from Stockholm, Sweden, Lars Jansson. And who else do we have? Digger Dog, good to see you. And Thomas Rock, thanks for coming on in. Kevin Kennedy, Operation Shutdown, Search and Destroy, good to see you all. And just another guy named Harry, thanks for coming on in. Who else do we have in our room tonight? Algaray over on Twitch, 1,000 jumping jacks in 4 minutes to warm up for David tonight. That's a good workout, my friend. Good workout. Boss Monster, how you doing? Noble Patrick, thanks for coming on in. Jessica McCreary, Alien Critter, good to see you both. As we scroll on down, there's Sierra. Thank you for joining us. Bobbert, good to see you. Andrew Hillier, that's right. Nice message. Go Canada. Yeah, that's right. Mr. Cowley, how you doing? And we continue on with our roll call with Broken Shadow Feather, Jeremy Jones. I'm Hardcore over on X. I can't speak. I'm so excited. Emperor Penguin, Brian S. Good to have you all here. Ginger Turtle, you've returned. You found your way home. Nice to see you. Millennium, my man. What's happening? Crave Dog, thanks for coming on in. Super Crazy, Be the Arrow. Good to have you both here. Adam B., how you doing? Trebor, Iron Wolf, how you doing, my friend? Thank you for joining us tonight. Dragonfly, thanks for joining us. Nikki in Seattle, good to see you. J Truth Seeker, Joanne on X, thank you for coming on in. Matthew Goodka, Body Tech, good morning to you. And let's get our radio side going. Hello and welcome to the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you for coming on in. We're going to be talking how to track UFOs. Scientist David Hooper is here with us. We'll get to him momentarily. We are in roll call on our YouTube side right now, and we want to just say hello to Dragonfly. And who else is next here on our list? Transnational UFO Crash Retrieval Program. Stan, nice to see you, my friend, over on X. Thank you for coming on in. Phineas on X as well. Good to have you here. Reminder, the super chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show. And don't forget, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag. So check it on out. Throw those horns up. Let's rock. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SLR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out, bump, foot, read the news wire, check out our site as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We got an awesome show tonight. How do we track UFOs, and do we have the technology to do so? Scientist David Hooper is going to be here momentarily to break it on down. Then in hour number 3, we're going to have Swamp Dweller kick things off. Tim James will join us with an abbreviated UFO report. It's Dave 101 night, and of course, the weird news of the week. Let's get right to it. I'm excited about this. You know, we talk a lot about UFOs on this show. And for those of you who tune in all the time, you'll be like, yeah, ad nauseum. But this is different. You see, we're not talking about the government side of everything. We're not talking about the aliens who are among us and taking us. We're talking about tracking these things. We're going to take a look at the scientific side tonight. You know, this is Science Bob territory here. David Hooper is an American engineer, entrepreneur, and founder. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and computer sciences from UC Berkeley and specializes in drones, sensors, and reverse engineering with experience at Velodyne LiDAR and other technological companies. He is the founder of EL, a UFO/UAP detection and defense startup developing readily deployable multi-spectral sensor systems that integrate optical and environmental background measurements for advanced aerial awareness. In addition to his work in technology and defense, David is a real estate investor. Good for him. Focusing on residential construction, new single-family home developments, and property remodels. Love this guy already. He's a real deal. David Hooper, welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. I'm really honored to be here. It's my first radio podcast. So thank you for showing me the whole new world on the radio. I always listened to radio growing up as a kid and still do a little bit to this day. But I'm glad to be here and just to share the space with you and get really into the nitty-gritty details about UAP detection. It's where I live basically 24/7. So I'm happy to answer any questions and get into the technical side of things.
Oh, we're going to have some fun with you, because here's the thing. The majority of us, when we are looking up to the sky, we don't know the science behind any of this. We don't know the technological aspect. We see something zigzag across the sky. We're not thinking drone. We're thinking aliens. And I would fall into that category. I'm not going to lie. I would totally fall into that category. For you, how did you get interested in the whole UFO aspect of everything?
Yeah, great question. So my introduction to the UAP topic, and especially the disclosure community, started in 2020. This is right when COVID was happening. I found I had some extra time, right? Like the world basically paused, and it really gave me and called for a break for me to re-examine my life and gave me an opportunity to, revisit and look at some things I wouldn't normally have the time to look at. One of the things was, catching up on shows. And I think what happened was someone told me about Stephen Greer, and I watched one of his documentaries on Netflix. I think that's what it was. And then from there, I was like, hey, this is pretty interesting. This whole concept about non-human intelligence, the secrecy, recovered technology. So it was just really intriguing for me. And then from there, looking at Stephen Greer's stuff, trying to, fill him out what his whole MO or his ethos was about, I started to get more into the topic, looking, who are other leading authority figures or voices in the space. And somehow I came across Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic, got that, read through it. And that's where I really felt compelled and a connection and a calling to the topic because of her theological background and as her, work in religious studies. For me, that was a big aspect of my life growing up, trying to make sense of the world, right, through my theological framing of things. Those big questions: where do we come from? Who is God? What's the future of humanity? Where are we going? I tried answering those questions through my faith, but I've always been, it was a little bit lacking. I was always searching for more. And so with Diana's book, it really honed in and seemed to offer me some explanations for some of the questions that I had. So after reading Diana's book, I was just, let's go all in. And that's what I did. So from COVID 2020 up until 2022, I just was consuming, content, information, doing the research, the literature, doing all the, looking at the testimony accounts from whistleblowers, from experiencers, and just looking at the whole range of discussions, right? Looking at the history, looking at Richard Dolan's work, picked up both of his books, talking about, the secrecy from the 1940s on. And so just trying to get up to speed with what's going on to the current state of affairs. And right at the end of 2021, early 2022 is when I started to see like, hey, I feel pretty solid with my grasp of things. How can I integrate myself into the community, or how can I provide value, right? And I was like, well, I'm an engineer. I have a background in sensor systems and reverse engineering. Reverse engineering, is a common phrase thrown around in the topic and in the literature. I was like, there seems to be a match or coherence here. So I was like, well, I can work on the detection problem. It seems like there's a couple groups working on this, right? You have the Galileo project, which is an academic endeavor led by Avi Loeb. You have a couple Sky 360, a group like that. You have some other projects. You have UAPX. I remember back when I was getting into it, those were kind of the name brands, household names that were in the UAP detection space, and UFO'DAP. And so I saw the UFO'DAP system, which, if the listeners don't know, it's a software program that you can download and purchase and download and use it to hook up these repurposed security cameras to monitor the skies. And so I saw the developer of that software, saw some of his products that he had on his Shopify website, and I was like, wow, it's a high cost to entry to get into UAP detection. How can I remove this cost or lower the barrier? I was like, well, I'm an engineer. Let me reverse engineer this product, this detection system, and see if I can build it myself. And that's what I did. I was able to find the equipment secondhand on eBay, right? Instead of paying $1,000 for one of the camera units, I was able to pick one up for $400. That's more than 50% savings. Did that for the second camera. And then, I purchased the software, which wasn't too much of a cost. I think it's around 40, $50 for a one-time licensing fee. And from there, that really got me started with a basic UAP detection system. I saw that there was more things that I can add on besides the camera sensors. And instead of, going ahead and buying it, which was available from the UFO DAP system, the MSDAU, I went ahead and made my own. And so that's how I got started. And from there on, I just started adding more features, adding more sensors, upgrading functionality. And from there, it just took off. But yeah, that's how I got started.
Oh, wow, man. You got addicted fast.
Yeah, you think so?
I think so. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Well, honestly, go ahead.
Let me tell you, if you don't mind, and I mean that as a complete compliment. Okay, because prior to 2017, there's the split in the UFO world is 2017. Prior to 2017, you had ufology. Now you have UApology going on. Okay, and the one thing that UApology has done, or a couple things that they have done right, is number one, they brought this topic to the masses. Ordinary people are having the UFO conversation, not about tinfoil hat conspiracy wingnut theorists, but they're looking at it as there's something there, which I think is fantastic. But number two, it has attracted a lot of bright minds and scientists such as yourself into this field, thinking, wow, if this stuff is out here, I want to know what it's all about. Because the one thing I learned from a former friend of mine who's a scientist, he said, you know what, us scientists, he goes, we're all nerds. And he meant that as a compliment, that our job is to figure out how things work, where they work, where things are coming from. This is what we do. This is what we love. It's our passion. And, just like I'm a nerd for a good story, I'm a hockey nerd. I mean, everybody's a nerd in some way. In a complimentary way, once again, I am saying that because I know there's going to be Katya people out there calling scientists nerds. But the whole point that I'm getting at is your mind, when you put most scientists that I know, when they put their mind to something, it is like stone cold focus. I need to figure out what this is. And so you getting addicted to this, I think it's great because you're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I wholeheartedly agree. That nerd mentality was definitely there and still exists to this day. That's that driving force that led me on a quest to figure out what's going on here, right? And as I was starting to get into the weeds within the topic, and as I'm starting to ground myself with other nerds in my respective disciplines of engineering and being a scientist, right? Other people that I look up to and refer to figure out what's going on. I was getting a lot of pushback too, right? Why aren't other people nerding out with me on this topic? I think that for me, if I can just pause for a second and really focus on that, was really concerning, or kind of like a bell went off in my head. Like, why aren't other people like interested in this or like freaking out? Like, I'm telling them about something that's probably the greatest question about, are we alone here on planet Earth, or is there something else living here with us? And like, people are like, oh no, that's conspiracy, or this is BS. But even when I provided them that research, right, the leaked documentation, whistleblower testimony, experiencer testimony, it for some people it just doesn't hit, it doesn't connect. So even though I know other nerds that are definitely want to search for their truth, if it doesn't pass that ontological filter, if it doesn't land with them, there's no way you can really bring anyone else with you into the topic. And that's something I really want to make note of and talk to people about, because some of the people that I hold in high regards, super intelligent people from Berkeley, it just doesn't hit with them, right? And I just like, damn, like what a missed opportunity for bringing on someone who's so intelligent, can totally contribute to the cause of figuring out what's going on here with the topic, but they're just not interested, or it doesn't vibe with them. What I've come to understand is that there may be an underlying reason for that, and also a bigger philosophical thing about someone's purpose, right? Like maybe it's not for everyone, and maybe at a certain time it will be ready for them, but yeah, I definitely nerded out, and I got, pretty addicted.
I got two questions to follow up to what you just said. The first question would be, do you think it's because many of your fellow scientists and colleagues are worried about grants, they're worried about tenure, they're worried about what the other people in their scientific field will think of them, whether or if they go down the UFO rabbit hole?
Definitely. I think that's one of the largest concerns for the mainstream scientists and working professionals out with careers, right? There's a lot on the line when you have a certain reputation, and to put that on the line, your career, your reputation, to try to work on something that is unorthodox or that may be something that is non-mainstream is really hard. It's kind of like, when Galileo came out saying that the Earth is not the center of the universe, it's to be heretical. It's kind of hard to be that, and you're giving up a lot to make those claims or get into this topic. For me, that wasn't the case because of where I was in my life at that point in 2020, where I had the freedom of not being tied to a career, tied to an institution, right, to a paycheck. I was very fortunate to have that freedom, and I think when you're beholden to someone, to some entity, a company, then there's certain limitations that are placed on you, or maybe are self-imposed, that you may be scared to break out of. And I see that a lot of working professionals and colleagues of mine that I hold in high regard. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things. And then second, to answer your question, I think it's almost like, if they accept this, or if they are starting to engage in this material and this work, it starts to really hit their notions about reality, and that might be scary, or that might be unfamiliar territory. So it might be like dangerous in a way to someone's ego or their sense of self in the universe and in the world. Like, I definitely went through that. I definitely went through a series of ontological shocks as I went through the material, and I think that's something that is talked about, but we need to raise that awareness to help others, because man, like, as some of the more ontologically shocking material starts to come out into the mainstream, it's already pretty much there. We have a duty and a moral responsibility to help our fellow brothers and sisters in humanity to, have a shoulder to lean on, or help support them, because some of this can be really jarring material. And so yeah, I think it's there's a lot there that we need to unpack.
The second question I had for you in regards to the subject matter, this is something when you're looking into the unknown. We don't know if it's time travel. We don't know if it's dimensions. We don't know if it's outer space. We could think that it is all three. We could think that maybe they're just here and they have a way to cloak themselves. I don't know. There's many different ways to think about this subject. When you sit back and you're lying in bed at night and your eyes are open and you're thinking about this subject, what do you think about regarding this? Where do you think this all comes from? Because there has to be a starting point.
Oh man, asking some really good questions, really tough ones. Well, when and honestly, to be just straightforward, forthcoming with you, in the beginning, it was really tough for me. I would have those restless nights as I was starting to deal with these questions, right, concerning my place in the world and humanity's place at large. What purpose do we serve, if any, in the cosmos? And what's our relationship to the other? And how long has that relationship going on, right? You can look at this through the lens of theology, as I touched on earlier, and that's how I usually framed it, or that's kind of my grounding. But it was really, for me, laying in bed at night, just thinking about, oh my God, this thing came up. To give you an example, I think this for me is like one of the, not the easiest, but I've thought about it so much now that I have a firmer grounding, is like, who made us, right? So when I'm in bed thinking about who made us, I have on one side what I was taught, what I was raised with, the Old Testament, right, from the Hebrew Bible, saying that God created us in his image, But then as I'm starting to look at other creation accounts of humans from Sumeria, talking about Enki and Enlil, these two beings that were non-human that came to Earth, and it's a mythical account of their creation myth, of what they came with, what they were brought up with, right? And so as I started to work with that material and asking myself that question, well, could this be true? Can this be possible? Is this plausible? It totally could be, right? I have on one side the story of a omniscient, omnipotent God that created us when there was nothing in the Garden of Eden, and then on the other side, I have a more technical, in a sense, it kind of made more sense, like of some beings that come into Earth and using slave labor. Slavery is a big topic for me in terms of how that our relationship with slavery and how it's been used to control us in different ways. And so for me, I have all these different considerations, right? And that topic of who made us really took on the form of just trying to get down to the truth of things. And ultimately, right, I don't have enough data to figure that out. I have these Hebrew texts that I don't read ancient Greek or ancient Hebrew, but there are classicists that do, and I can start to rely on their interpretations or translations. But then you have theological framing that adds a overlay on it. So these are all the considerations I was making. And so as I started to get more into that literature of other creation myths, there's just something that, like a light bulb hit my head. I can't necessarily discredit this, and it may be useful to keep this in the back of my mind as I'm working through uncovering the truth regarding reality, right? I can't necessarily say one is more true than the other. I'm still limited with the information I know, but it serves a purpose to hold this this theme or this data, because it's valuable when you're making interpretations of new data, right? Let me give you an example. As the psi topic starts to become more accepted and there's more credibility behind it, right? The abilities of humans having the potential to be able to interact with non-human intelligences telepathically, to be able to be clairvoyant, know things in the future, have access to non-local information. There are glimpses, there are little notes, little features of that in the mythological stories of Sumeria, and even in the Genesis account of the Old Testament, right? There's talks about at one point we all had like a common language, and then that was removed. What if that common language was telepathy, right? There's also accounts of, in the Sumerian myth, that Enki, who co-created us in their account, made us too smart, and we were too hard to control, right, as a slave force. So they had to remove some of our abilities. So I'm starting to engage with this material at the level of the stories, and I'm starting to piece together things. And so for me, I can't outright buy either story, but it's useful to have this in the back of my head as I'm working through the different material. And I think that's my thing to answer you in a way, is that you can't necessarily discredit these things that you're starting to work with. They're really useful as you're starting to make sense of new data and new topics.
I love it. Dude, I could listen to you all night long, man. I totally could. I mean, just hearing your enthusiasm over this and the potential that it could unlock, not only for the science, but humanity in general, if we were able to figure out what this technology is. Well, first off, I guess we have to figure out if it's ours, and just be hidden, or if it's actually technology from another universe, another world, another planet, another species. So, I mean, there are so many questions that need to be unlocked with this, but I wouldn't even know where to start. I'd be like, just blowing my head up if I had to, storyboard all of this in order to figure out a starting point. And on that note, David, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we are going to go to our first break here at the bottom of the hour. David Hooper is our guest. He's a scientist looking into UFOs. He is part of UAVs at Berkeley. So check it on out. How to track UFOs. Can we do it? We're going to find out next on Spaced Out Radio. Stay tuned, everybody. All right, we are clear. So just a reminder, our YouTube and podcast audience can hear us. And yes. Blue Moon, how are you? Paul Demon, good to see you. Mm-hmm. And for the American hockey fans out there, I'll just give you a little bit of this. There we go. Vanessa, how are you? You having fun yet, Dave?
This has been phenomenal. And honestly, thank you for holding the space and being able to engage with me at a level that's really refreshing. It really means a lot to me. You know, I thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a scientist. I don't know the first thing about science, man. I really don't. I mean, in high school, if science was over here, I went over here. But I understand on a basic level enough to understand the conversation at times. And the way you're saying it tonight is very, how can we say it? You're making it very easy. You're making it very easy and blue collar, which I really appreciate. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, my end goal, or at least my experience here with what I'm trying to do and to encourage, is to empower other people to figure out what's going on, right? And that for me is really by democratizing the access to the data, right? And shining a light at places where the data is maybe kept hidden, or where access to the data is maybe secreted or put away for only a select few to have access to that data. And so I want to shine more light on those areas, because I don't think the truth should only be for a select few, you know, or even just a scientist. It should be available to the common person.
Greatly appreciate that. And like a lot of times, I've heard scientists on this show where I'm literally like, I have steam coming out of my ears because my brain is trying to work so hard to understand what they're talking about. But we're very fortunate. That's extremely far and few between, but we're gonna get into a lot more fun parts of the conversation coming up here. So,
Awesome.
Quick shout out to Rat's Ass. Good to see you. Moody Mongol, how you doing? And Blastface Records, welcome to SOR chat. I can't remote view on the spot like that. Sorry. We got about 2 minutes here, bud.
Great. Yeah, I actually wanted to show you. Highly recommend this book. It's called Artemis Unveiled by Jason Reza Dorjani. It's basically a fiction novel, but it almost looks like a foreshadowing concept, where the author Dorjani gets into the possible future timelines of disclosure, and how the moon plays a huge role within disclosure, acting as a psychotronic control system. So it's very interesting.
Quick shout out here, because I always like to say hello to my guests or our listeners who are coming into the chat rooms here. Illustrator BW, how you doing? Candy, how are you? Jeff Steve Garvey is here. He'll hit a home run for you people. Yes, he will. He won't score an overtime goal, but he'll hit a home run for you. Yeah, I went there. Mm-hmm. It's good beard you got going on there.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, getting there. Little patchy, but it's filling in.
Yeah, it's always been patchy right here. And honestly, want to know something? Whenever I'm bored or whatever, I kind of like pull right here. I think that's why this.
Dude.
You too?
Gotta pull. Oh
yeah.
You
So
know,
I gotta pull more up here where it's patchy, so it fills in.
Yeah, man. That's how you get a beard of knowledge, is when you start doing this shit. It's true.
I'm getting some grays. I can't even believe that.
I know the feeling. We got about 5 seconds. Thank you to Chill Farm and 3 Sides for the super chats tonight. Greatly appreciate it. Here comes the second half hour. Here comes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. We're talking how to track UFOs. David Hooper is our guest tonight on the show. Before we bring him back on, I want to remind all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Scientist David Hooper is here tonight. How do we track UFOs? Can we even track them? That is something that we are learning very, very quickly here as the subject matter of UFOs, UAP phenomena continues to grow. And David, we thank you so much for taking the time to actually join us and teach us a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad to be here. I'm very excited to get into the technical subject matter regarding UAP detection and how to enable others to do the same, and just to share my experience, my knowledge, and a lot of my failures, but are really learning experiences, to impart that with others so I can save them the time and the hassle of debugging camera sensors, technology. I want to impart that as much as I can to people so that they can really get up to speed with what's the best way to track UAPs.
Okay. How do we do it? How does it work?
Yeah. So the first line of defense or detection is optical cameras. You're going to need photo stills or videos of potential UAPs so that we can get a resolve of what we're seeing, right? The thing is, though, with traditional cameras, whether they be from a cell phone or from a high-end digital camera, is that most cameras nowadays that we use have what are called IR UV cut filters. And what those are, IR stands for infrared and UV stands for ultraviolet. These IR UV cut filters basically block out any infrared or ultraviolet light from being reached into the sensor of the camera. So if you just think about that for a moment, if we have these devices that we're using to try to get an image or a video of a UAP, a potential UAP that we're seeing, and it's blocking these wavelengths of light, we're already starting at base 1, base 0 with limited information. We're essentially filtering out that data. So that's the first step we need to acknowledge and put that into the minds of the masses, is that, hey, we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to raise the alarm that the reason why we can't see UAPs well with a traditional camera phone on an iPhone or an Android or with a Nikon, Canon DSLR is because they're limited inherently, right? Based with how they're manufactured and made, because normally we don't want to see that stuff in our still images or our videography. So with that in mind, one thing that is a very simple, straightforward solution is that if you do want to collect data optically on UAPs, we need to have those filters removed from the sensor stack, right? And so this is a very straightforward process. It's not too difficult. From a scale of like 1 to 10, I would, rate this at like a 5 in terms of difficulty. There are a lot of tutorials online, but you basically have to disassemble that camera and remove that filter. It's much harder on camera phones. Like on an iPhone, it's probably a level difficulty of 9 or 10, but I'm getting more at, a DSLR or a point and shoot. Ideally, you'd want something that has a telephoto zoom lens capability, right? And something that can record at a high frame rate and at a high resolution. So something like 4K, 120 frames per second. This process of removing that IR UV cut filter, once you actually remove that and reassemble the camera, you can then start to receive that information. We can start seeing those wavelengths of light that we wouldn't normally be able to see. So that's the first step. You want to have optical cameras that are able to see in that wavelength of light. Once you have these optical cameras that can see in those wavelengths of light, and I'll get into why we want that a little bit later on as I start to further define the UAP detection system. You want to have different types of cameras, of optical lenses, so that we can have different views of the sky, right? So ideally, you would want to have an all-sky camera. This is a hemispherical lens that's able to see the entire sky, right? Secondly, you'd want to have a camera that is able to be zoomed in, right? So that you can get a better resolve of that UAP, you can get a better shot of it. Ideally, with the camera that's on the zoom functionality, you'd want to have the ability to also maneuver it on the pan and tilt axis, right? So that you can, pan it left, pan it right, tilt it up or tilt it down, so that you can then control that with software, right? Without software, you're either doing it, you're probably going to be doing it manually, which is how a lot of people start out. But to really have an autonomous system, you need code that runs, that processes that video data, and is able to then tell the cameras that are mounted on that pan tilt head to then start tracking the UAP, right, as it's maneuvering through the sky. So that's the first line of detection that ideally any UAP detection system would need, right? And from there, as you start to get into the different wavelengths of light, you can then have cameras that are not only full spectrum, which is what I was referring to earlier, once you remove the IR UV cut filter, but you can also have dedicated cameras that are specific for certain frequencies of light. So a lot of those forward-looking infrared videos that you've seen, the gimbal go fast, right, that came out of the DoD from Christopher Mellon and Will Elizondo, those are thermal-based videos, right? And so those are generally in long-wave infrared. You'd also ideally want a camera that has solely long-wave infrared so that you can get similar types of quality of videos. The only discerning part with that is that you also need the ability to change the zoom on these long-wave infrared cameras, on these thermal cameras, because that's how you really get those nice close-up shots. The issue there is that currently where the market's at and where the engineering's at with these zoomable thermal cameras is that it's pretty costly to be able to acquire one of these. So that's what I hope to do, and that's what we plan to do, and it's what our vision is for the future, to bring to the market these lower cost systems of thermal zoomable cameras for consumers, so that we can get those similar types of data that the government has. We want to democratize access to these types of data formats and these classes of data. Certain types of data shouldn't be just for the government. Everyone should have access to acquiring data that's out there in the world. With that said, you also would likely want to have a UV specific camera to complement the long wave infrared camera. The reason why I'm talking about and getting so into the nature of UV infrared based cameras is that if you look at the actual science and theories that are being proposed by some of the leading authority figures within the UAP research community and scientists and physicists of the like, someone such as Hal Puthoff or Jack Sarfati. Hal has a really great paper that everyone should go check out called Space-Time Metric Engineering, where he goes into the possible theory regarding UAP propulsion. And when I read that, I was like, wow, I really need to have very specific cameras to look at the possible byproducts or the effects of the space-time metric engineering that may be going on with UAPs, namely being the red and blue shifting of electromagnetic light. To give you an analogy, when an ambulance comes by and you can hear it and it's the frequency of the audio changes, right? That same thing should apply with UAPs as they're maneuvering and coming at you or coming away from you, depending on the mode of travel. The frequency of light will either go down or up depending on if they're coming towards you or away from you. It's basically the Doppler shift effect, but on electromagnetic light. That's what UAPs do, analogous to what ambulances do with audio, but UAPs should be doing that with visible light. They should be changing the frequency. With that said, if they're upshifting or downshifting that frequency, the visible light spectrum is very narrow, and on both sides is UV and infrared. So ideally, if you have this possible effect, you'd want to have these sensors that can prove or disprove this theory, this hypothesis. And that's basically what we do, right? So as we go out and collect more data, whether it be at UAP hotspots or when we go with experiencers, we have UV and infrared and full spectrum cameras so that we can start to gather data and test these hypotheses that Hal and Jack Sarfati have proposed. So that's a pretty good summary of the optical camera detection component of UAP detection systems. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, another line of detection that you really would want to have are looking into the electromagnetic effects of UAPs on the environment. So you would want to have an electromagnetic field strength meter, an EMF meter. I think there's the common ones are called tri-field meters, commonly used in the paranormal. When you go to a haunted house, you have it and it goes haywire when you start having an entity or some type of paranormal force interacting with you. So the reason why you would want to have that is because if UAPs are using space-time metric engineering, it's likely that they are able to harness energy at a localized point and manipulate the local space-time fabric, right? And with that said, if they are potentially doing that, there should be a large fluctuation in the electric field or the magnetic field. So that's why you would want to have that, right, to test that theory out.
May I please just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
In that detection system, the majority of us who are staring up at the sky can't tell a UFO from anything that could be potentially military or secret technology. Is there a way to define, or is there any signatures to define the difference between a UFO and UAP that is man-made?
To understand the question, are you asking about if we can detect the difference between terrestrial UAP and non-terrestrial UAP? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's a really good question. Well, to be honest with you, something that's hitting me as I'm starting to try to answer that and frame a response is, are terrestrial UAPs even a real thing? I know in the literature, reverse engineered human-made UAPs, it's a common data point, right? So I can't necessarily discount that, but when I went to the Seoul Symposium a couple of months ago, I asked Eric Davis, like, hey, being so close up to the program and interfacing in different aspects of it, what are your thoughts on reverse engineered man-made UAPs? And he's like, no, just flat out saying, like, no, there's no way the program has even got to that point. And so for me, that was really jarring to hear that. And really, as I'm starting to, think about your question, that was raised in my mind, what if this, I'm not saying it's disinformation, but would we have that capability if we did come to that point where we did have the means to be able to reverse engineer it and have a fully functioning man-made UAP? Would that even be a breakaway civilization? How would we even be able to detect the difference with that? So these are all really important things that I'm considering, right? And as you build the UAP detection system, you'd want that capability. You'd not only want the capability to detect between different types of UAP, whether it be a triangle, an egg, a classic saucer, right? To be able to discern between those, but you also want to know, hey, who owns that thing, right? Is it us? Whether it be part of the program or a breakaway civilization, or is what type of faction or being is it from the non-human intelligence side? So to answer that, we're still limited in terms of the data. We don't have enough data to be able to make those conclusions. But I think as we start to collect more data, we can start to nail in at whether or not that's even possible. But it's going to be tough, I will say, because how do you distinguish between different types of UAP? Well, I was just talking to a friend actually about this today. Well, there's actually, the different classifications of UAP, whether it be the different shapes. As we start to gather more data, maybe different types of UAPs are used for different reasons, right? So it's only through the data that we will find out the truth. And I think we're just limited by our data collection setups right now. And once we start having more awareness in our data sets is when some of those answers can start to be answered more accurately.
So continuing on with the process of data detection, what kind, going on a different route about signatures, what kind of signatures are you looking for? Because a lot of people can say get flight radar and find out what the majority of stuff is flying in the sky, whether it's satellites, whether it's commercial or military, but sometimes military doesn't show up depending if they have their radar on or not. I live in the middle of nowhere, man, where we are lucky to see maybe 2 jets a day flying over. Okay. And just this past summer, I was standing on my patio having a conversation with my dad, heard this really loud jet flying over. And I look up and I recognize it as a B-1 bomber flying towards Alaska. And I was just geeked right up because I've seen them on static display at air shows, but I've never, ever seen one flying at 39,000 feet with its wings open and all 4 engines as loud as they were. So, I mean, how do we have, or what kind of signatures do you have that are going to be different in detecting this comparatively to what we could get on, say, flight radar or other apps?
Yeah, well, if you look at what's available to the public, and it's mandated by the FAA, everything that's supposed to be flying up in the skies is supposed to be broadcasting ADS-B, right? Which is basically a transmission of what the altitude, who owns the aircraft, what type of aircraft it is, so that other people know, the coordinates of that aircraft for safety of flight. And we have that capability, right? Those are the signatures that we are looking for. We're using software-defined radios, monitoring the ADS-B frequencies to see if there are any transmissions from any of the objects that are being seen in the sky so that we can exclude those. So that is one signature. But as you said, what if it's a secret military program and they're not necessarily broadcasting to anybody because they don't want to be? How do you know if that's a UAP, non-terrestrial, or if it's just an advanced human stealth fighter, right? Or something of the like. Well, that's where the importance of the data and having different types of data sets is really the big point here. So aside from the ADS-B monitoring, something that we can also do is use passive radar, right? Which isn't reliant on active radar systems from the local government radars. Passive radar, as I'm not sure if you're aware of it, is basically the intention of using an active transmitting source. It's not necessarily a radar tower, but it can be like something like an FM radio tower or a digital television broadcast signal. And you tune in the software-defined radio to that specific frequency. You point your antennas to the local transmitter, and anything that passes between you and that tower that's transmitting that signal can be thought of as like a source of light that if anything passes through that, we can see the reflections of that over time. So that's a way to have signatures of possible craft that are flying, whether it be terrestrial, non-terrestrial, whether it be UAP or non-UAP. And as we gather, the velocity and the acceleration values from that, we can start to see the tracking of this thing, right? Is it exhibiting one of the 5 observables? Is it moving really, really fast? Is it moving with high acceleration that a normal conventional aircraft could do? Or is it not? So those are the things you want to start looking at to rule out any anomalous suspicions. Aside from that, the other data points that you would and signatures that you would really want are with regard to possible time dilation effects, right? If you're truly looking at the UAP aspect. And what I mean by that is if you have 2 very accurate clocks that are atomic in nature, where they use some type of source of oscillation that is atomic, right? Such as rubidium, that's a very common atomic clock. They're very precise timekeeping devices. And so what you can do, if you have 2 of these clocks, you can have one away from you that acts as a control, and you have one with you where it would be by the observational setup. And these two clocks would be synced at one point, and they would remain in sync as long as there was not any possible time dilation, right? So if you did suspect that this is a UAP, and if it did in fact mess with the space-time fabric, then you may be able, the theory is that you should be able to pick up some local time dilation, some distortion in relative time nearby the experiencer of the UAP. So when you go back after the event and compare the two clocks, there would be a noticeable discrepancy of time. So that's another signature that would tell you, hey, is this something terrestrial or non-terrestrial? Aside from that, the only other sensor that would give you another layer of signature and data collection would be in terms of radioactivity, right? If you think about the literature that's out there talking about the atomic connection to UAPs, right? Whether they be interested in our atomic assets, our atomic capabilities with nuclear warheads, or whether it be as propulsion sources for UAPs, right? Bob Lazar often talks about element 115. You'd want to have some type of sensor, which is commonly referred to as a Geiger counter, that's able to pick up these radioactive particles that are being emitted from radioactive sources. So the one that we have, it's actually, we have two tubes. So it's able to detect, one's a high sensitivity tube and one's a low sensitivity tube. It's able to detect particles from alpha, beta, gamma, and all the way to X-rays. So you'd want something like that to test out the hypothesis of whether or not a unknown or anomalous craft may be using atomic material as its potential propulsion source. Whether or not it does, it leads up to actually determining that when you go out to test it. But that's something that you would likely want to have to, it's like a telltale possible signature of a UAP.
We got 2 minutes to go before we have to go to break at the top of the hour. Scientist David Hooper is our guest tonight, detecting UFOs, UAP. Is the technology there strong enough to be able to get into the depths of space, like past where satellites are flying? Or do we need to even go that deep, that far into space to see if they're coming from that realm?
Yeah, we in terms of terrestrial tracking activities, we don't have the technological means to be able to do that because of the limitedness of the sensors that we're working with. But those satellites that are up in the low Earth orbit are probably some of the best devices and sensors to be able to do such a thing, right? But it's the barrier to entry of that is capital, or you have a government space program, right? So there is that capability, but it's limited to a select few organizations. So there are certain bounds which we're limited with, that we're working with on the terrestrial front, right? Being limited to on-Earth physical applications, but that doesn't mean we can't gather data. It just means that we're somewhat limited, right? But there are ways to still figure out whether or not something's a UAP, and it's by having multiple sources of sensors that are able to pick up telltale signatures that I described.
Well, that's interesting. We got about a minute to go here. Do you think then that this is something within our orbit that we need to be paying attention to?
I definitely think so. I think when you look at some of the accounts from the Navy personnel that were flying off the coast, they definitely talk about looking at the radar scans and how they're flying at certain elevations and they just drop to sea level.
Right.
So it's something that we do need to be watching out for, but we just need to have the technology to be able to do that. And so that's the limiting factor. It's having access to the tech.
How do you get that though? I mean, obviously you'd need grants, donations, or, hopefully a Peter Thiel in your back pocket in order to do that, but it is something that, we'll talk about when we get to hour number 2 here. So many questions for our scientist friend, David Hooper, tonight. How can we track UFOs? This is something he's trying to figure out on a scientific front. This is Spaced Out Radio. Hour 2 of the show with David Hooper comes up next. Stay tuned, everybody.
with host Dave Scott.
All right. Dave, we got about 6 minutes. I'm going to go refill my water glass here. And so what I will do is just put you in the green room. I'll be right back, okay? All right. Be right back, everybody. All right. I am back. All right. Bring David back in. That was a fast hour, man.
Went by quick, huh?
Oh, yeah. You know it's a good show when it goes by quick like that.
Yeah. It's so interesting to get into the technical details. Some of the things I'm really looking forward to as I start to develop the detection system further is looking at the human element, right? Because we're a data collector as well, but the only thing is that we're not objective, right? We're very subjective, but there's still ways to gather objective data from that human sensor, and that's some of the things that I've been working on, moving towards that front, which is along the lines of the psionic assets and looking at the effect that psionic assets have on UAP detection.
We got 20 seconds to go here. I want to say a big thank you to Mama Catherine, Paramarv, Three Sides, and Chill Farm for the great super chats tonight. Greatly appreciate the love and support, everybody. It's a great way to support what we do. Don't forget, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. And here we go, everyone. Here we go into the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Detecting UFOs with scientist David Hooper is the topic du jour. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you very much for tuning us in. We really do appreciate burning your listening ears. Reminder to all of you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Salamandroid. Salamandroid is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. All right, we have David Hooper here. He is an investigator into trying to track down UFOs, UAPs, trying to build the technology to do so. David, there are other groups who have tried to do this, so far unsuccessfully. Now we hear Skywatcher is trying to do this as well. They seem to have a lot of mobility, money behind them in order to do this. Usually we think that there's only maybe one or two that are going to accomplish, because we always think in small numbers rather than larger numbers. Would you ever consider working with a group like Skywatcher or others who are trying to do this same type of detection system?
Of course. I think the more that we can collaborate together is going to help each of us further contribute to the cause of figuring out what's going on. So I have no objection or problem working with other groups. I know in the past I have reached out and other groups have reached out to me. Sometimes things fall through with planning and coordination, but I think that's why it's important to really be on top of things so that we don't lose track of progress. But yeah, I think the more competition there is, it's better for the data collection efforts, right? If you have two or more teams, it's better than one person or one group working on it. Because as you said, there are groups that start and then groups start falling out and just things like die out. So we cannot let that continue to happen. And we need to promote the invigorance into these communities of people that are able to come on. But as we were talking earlier, and as you mentioned briefly, having access to capital can be the difference between someone being able to get into this or not. And so that's why my whole purpose is, as we start to really engineer these systems, right, design the PCBs, design the integrated camera housing units, and have a package that is at a lower cost to consumers through the engineering, we can make it more affordable to people to get into this. And so that's really the key here, is that we need to apply engineering processes to be able to make products that people want to buy and, give their dollars to, because the value's there, right? Instead of dealing with all the headaches of the setup, of having a clunky system that you have to integrate all these parts, you just have something that is going to work, that has been tried and tested, has been debugged, all the kinks have been worked out, and it's something that you can use to collect real hard data. And so that's the thing that I'm really looking forward to, is that I think that will happen eventually, whether it be my company or others. I think there's going to be a need from consumers, and there already is a need, right? People want to validate what they're seeing, and people are willing to pay money for that. But I just want to make sure that the value is aligned or matches with the cost or the capital required to acquire that device.
Is that the purpose, David, is to try and get this in everyday people's hands so that way they can be a part of this study?
Totally. Not only for the scientific pursuit, right, to collect data, but also for the future in terms of how we're engaging with non-human intelligence. We need the capacity or the capability to be able to determine friend from foe, one faction from another, or just to make sense of things, right? We don't want to live in a day and age where access to tech is what's going to limit someone from knowing if they're in a situation where they need to, a certain intent is there or whether intent is not there, right? We need to be able to make informed decisions, and to be able to do that, you need data and with technological sensors. So yeah, definitely. I foresee a future where we're providing access to information through these technology devices, so people can, for themselves, make up their decisions, right? Like a common question is, I think it's like joked around a lot, is like, if the UAPs came down tomorrow, would you get on the craft? Well, to truly answer that question, I need more data, right? Who are we working, or who's offering to take me on for a ride? Where are we going, right? What's their intent? Are they lying to me? I need to make those determinations for myself, but I can't rely on necessarily third-hand information. I need to collect that information myself, right? Or someone as a person trying to ask these questions, right? This is a little bit of an extreme example, but something that may play out in the future. So we need these devices to be able to tell us that, right? That's able to characterize what the UAPs are. And then ultimately, my vision for the future and future of disclosure is building devices that are going to tell us, whether or not someone's a non-human intelligence, right? Are they human or not? And if they are non-human, what type of non-human intelligence are they? That we need access to those types of technologies at some point as we're progressing as a society.
You mentioned something very strange there about, would you walk onto a UFO? I mean, and I'm going to be blunt with you, okay? I've seen 2 UFOs on the ground. And the first one was in 2014. The last one was in 2023. And I could tell you right now, man, there is a sense of anxiety and paranoia that shoots through your body when you see something like that up close and personal. We all talk tough that we would do it. We all do. But when it comes down to it, there is still human fear that gets into that. Have you ever thought about that?
Totally. And Lou touches on this, right? Lou Elizondo. How do we come to terms with, how do we grip with what looks like it's the unfolding reality that we are not the apex predator, right? There's that innate fear, that survival instinct that's telling you like, hey, watch out. I think we're confronted with that apex predator when we do come in contact with either a non-human intelligence or a craft, something that's totally out of this world and something that we're not in control of, right? So when that question is posed, and when you're really met with that decision or that thought of that, I think our animalistic nature arises, and it's like a challenge to see what your ethos is and like who you really are. Like, some of the considerations I've had in figuring out what my response to that answer would be, or if I had, a UAP in front of me and someone's telling me like, come on, is like, well, if I went in, would I be able to come back? And if I did come back, would it be like 50 years in the future? Like, what are the limitations of that? With time dilation coming into possible play. I go back and forth, right? But I honestly think I would be in a similar situation as you, right? Until you're really faced with that reality, we can talk all this big talk, but until you're faced with that finality, you really don't know until you're met with that.
Very cool. Very cool. When you get this set up and you start collecting data, what is the plan for the data? Where does it go? Who gets it? The big worry that many people have is that it would fall into government hands.
Yeah, great questions. As I started to collect the data, I honestly thought about these questions as well. And my first thoughts were, do I engage with the offices that are set up to deal with this issue, namely Arrow, right? And as I started to consider that possibility and ask some of the professional people within the UAP space about that, I got a lot of no, like, like be very careful with who you engage with and just be mindful of how you engage with certain organizations. And so to me, that was always in the back of my mind. I didn't really want to be fearful, right? Like engaging with Arrow, but I think that access to the data ultimately shouldn't be kept secret. You need to be transparent. So in the back of my mind, I was like, well, if I'm embodying the value of transparency, I can't necessarily fear Arrow or the director, whoever is managing it, right? Or if there's some malintentions there, I have to overcome that, right? And I have to make this accessible to everyone at some point. To be transparent. So that's the thing. I think transparency is key. The UFO community is really strong about transparency. They don't like grifters. They don't like when there's things kept from them. And I think that's really important. You have to behave and operate in that fashion so that you may be trusted by the community, or else you won't be taken seriously and they'll smell something's wrong. So my plan is to make the data available for others and for other scientists to review as well. And so people can start to find insights in the data. My friend Jared, who has a company where he's working on the effect on humans, right? Engaging into contact protocols with regard to UAP and NHI. I did a UAP summoning session with him. He's into the the contact modalities, but I was just there with my tech sensors. He also has some sensors, but more geared towards the EEG, right? Looking at the brain waves, looking at heart rate, looking at blood oxygen monitoring. He posted his data for people to see, right, from the sensors that he had, looking at the biofeedback. And I think just today there's someone who commenting on picking out from the data anomalous events tied to certain events seen in the camera footage. So that just goes to show that by democratizing access to the data to the public, we can start to get insights faster than would normally be done if it were just solely academic or governmental or private pursuit. So it's imperative that the data be accessible to everyone. It's just there are also considerations for that as well, right? Like the moral and ethical responsibilities for like data that might be truly shocking. That's another thing. Usually it has to go through peer review, right? And it has to go through a publication through, some white paper. But the fashion that I like to run with, and this is coming from the hacker culture of like build things, break things, right? And just like re-implement them, keep going, reiterating. I kind of see that with the data too. The data is objective, right? It's only through the subjective application of people coming into the data and making decisions or conclusions about the data is when possible things can come about, where it can be some shocks to the system or to the status quo, right? Saying like, hey, maybe there's a characteristic within the passive radar data that correlates to the images that we've seen on the infrared. And this is actually alarming, saying like, hey, there's something anomalous here, right? It's through that subjective means that when things start happening and the effects of that go downstream to the public. But objectively, the data doesn't say anything other than just the raw results. So making it available, I think, is the best thing to do. And then humanity decides what they want to do with that data.
Do you want some audience questions?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, let's get right to them. There's a few of them here. Let's start off with Mama Catherine here. How close are you with the NHI detector?
It's very preliminary. I started talking about this on X a little bit a couple of days ago. I have been in discussions for the last year now, trying to. This is very preliminary, but I can give you where I'm at with it. It's very much in the research phase of looking at what are the different metrics that we're looking at in terms of data collection and what sensors that are attributed to those specific data formats that can tell us signs about different types of NHI, or what are some telltale signatures of NHI, right? Like actual physical manifestations of different types of beings. Well, I was speaking to someone from Enigma Labs, actually the ex-CTO, and he messaged me one day. He was like, "It's all about the vibes," right? And so that really like set off a bell in my head, right? And it teeters along the lines of consciousness, right? If we may be able to one day build a device that's able to examine or to provide data on consciousness, right? That's still a very murky idea. That's very rudimentary, right? But if we can start to classify different aspects of consciousness, whether it be lower forms of consciousness such as plants or dogs or animals, and then at the higher hierarchies of humans, we can then start to work our way up to some higher levels of consciousness that may exhibit from non-human intelligences, right? And there's definitely the aspects of, well, there may be some non-human intelligences that do have that higher consciousness and some don't. But I think consciousness is the key. But the thing is, how do you measure consciousness, right? Well, we don't even know what consciousness is. We don't even know what our soul is, really. There's a lot of theories regarding it's a fundamental to the universe, right? It's an energetic structure, an informational structure, right? But how do you measure that? I think that's going to be really tough. But hopefully, through breakthroughs of quantum physics, that we can start to apply some of those theories to make technological sensors to measure consciousness. That's something that I'm really interested in. But I think my intuition's telling me it's about the vibe. Somewhere, somehow, we're going to have to measure the vibrations of consciousness to be able to detect non-human intelligences. The cool thing is, though, we already have a detector to detect non-human intelligences, and that's us. The limitation there is that it's just subjective, right? So maybe a way to not go around it, but to work with the limitations of the human subjective filtering system, right? Our representational cognition is that we look at the biofeedback from humans. I think that may be the key, and I think this is what I was working through my mind last couple of weeks, is that maybe we might not be able to measure consciousness directly, but indirectly measure it through the feedback from humans, right? And what if, like what you were saying, Dave, you know, that fear or that feeling you got when you saw that UAP in front of you? Well, there, in the literature and the testimonies of experiencers, there's often this either fear of complete love, right? That may be intentionally forced upon the experiencer, or may be unintentional, and may just be a byproduct of the feelings that are telepathically exchanged with the non-human intelligences. Or sometimes there's just straight out fear, right? So it's both extremes. If there's some way we can measure that response, maybe looking at us, the humans, and seeing our physiological response, we may be able to gauge those vibes from non-human intelligences. And we innately have this with our intuition, having that vibe of knowing someone is good, or, you know, we're connected with. I think that's going to be along the lines of building out the NHI detector. It's going to be looking at the human and seeing how we can measure those data points.
We have 5 minutes to go before we have to go to break at the bottom of the hour. David Hooper is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. How do you divide the science between the personal experience and the data collection? Because the person who has a very personal experience is not a nuts and bolts type object that you can just break down. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's by applying technological objective sensors on the subjective entity, right? The human. So that is the most clear, straightforward approach in my mind, because you're always going to have that that connection between the experience that someone's taken on, right, and how they interpret that experience and how they relate with the information exchange. It's I use the word skewed. I don't mean that in a negative way, but the connotation for me is more like scientifically based, right? It's skewed in a certain direction based off their experience. So working with that data is sometimes hard, but it is useful in certain aspects to include that data as signal points. So it's through the application of technological sensors looking at humans that we can start to objectively quantify the results of that data and to be able to determine whether or not an NHI is good or maybe from a certain type of faction, right? We can start to make those determinations by looking at those objective data sources.
How do you track aliens when we don't even know they exist? Even though some of us who've seen them believe they do.
Yeah. Well, how do you track aliens if we don't even know if they exist? Well, it's tough. I mean, you have these comments made by very prominent senior officials like Carl Nell, right, saying unequivocally he knows that non-human intelligence is real. Gary Nolan has gone on record saying that as well with his determination of probability. That's 100%. But then again, these are subjective, right, data points. It's tough. The truth is behind the classified nature of the government, of the military industrial complex and the intelligence community. So it's only through the examination of the UAP community and of the literature and the data that you can start to see that it's like behind this paywall, right? But even then, how do you present that to someone scientifically? It's very hard to do that. So in response, I would say, do you have a security clearance? And then I could tell you, but and then you even have to be read in. So I kind of jokingly say that, but yeah, it's a tough thing, it's we can't say because we don't have anything. We can't show you a UAP or an alien, but someone somewhere has it.
Oh, I hope they do. I hope they
Yeah.
do. Somebody's got aliens around here, my friend. Somebody does. Can we sneak in one more question? Lee, I asked yours. Comment by one random guy in the chat room. No tech can detect quasi-physical phenomena. Just your quick thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the boundary of our technological sensors are being met, right? As we start to try to observe the observer, we may have like a retro causality effect where our observing of the observer may introduce some noise into the system or have a variance. So it's tough to say, right? Like maybe we're limited because of our technology. So what if there are ways to maybe go outside the typical mundane reality that we're currently working with? And that's where it gets into metaphysical concepts of philosophy, but we can get into that afterwards. It's a little bit of an expanded context that I can get into.
Do you see this as being a wave to the future and what technology we'll have? I need a 30-second answer.
30-second, and might be a little bit jarring. I think it's a way to the afterlife. That sounds outright crazy, but I think even one of the psionic assets have mentioned this in the Skywatcher, not in the Skywatcher videos, but maybe offhand on his Twitter. I think what we're dealing with here when we talk about the higher dimensional states that these UAP may be coming from, it may be referring to somewhat of an place where souls go when they pass from this human existence. So maybe that's where things may lie.
Good point. Right after
this. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
All right, we are clear.
Cool. It is going by really fast.
Totally. Excuse me. Still having fun?
Oh yeah, that last question was really pushed it for me in terms of, we're really limited by what we can observe, especially with our technological sensors. And so it may be that we have to enter states that are non-normal to be able to start to observe things, right? And that gets really freaky really fast, right? Topics of the afterlife, topics of altered states of consciousness, meditative states, in these limbo states that humans can go into and engage with. We start to process information and have access to maybe non-local information that we wouldn't normally have access to. And how do we deal with that data that we're coming back with, right? How scientifically can we take that? It goes back to what I was saying, right? Like, you're going to always have a subjective skewed aspect to that data coming from the observer. But maybe there's a way we can get physiological data to support some of the claims, or to make some conclusions about what's going on with the human while they're in those states. And we can start to tie in themes regarding the subjective experiences tied with the objective data points to come to certain conclusions, right? That's where I see us going with this re-merging of the empirical with the supernatural, right? With the sciences, with the paranormal. I think we're going to start to go there, and we're already starting to see this with the psionic assets and their psi abilities, and with the telepathy tapes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, and how our technology changes, especially with artificial general intelligence. It may be able to nudge us certain ways, or get us to have certain insights that we may not normally be able to get through our limited means being humans.
Love it. Love it. So much fun, man. So
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Where do you stand on psionics?
So for the last couple years, I have been in the back of my mind, I had the intuition where I would have to start engaging with experiencers and people who report that they have contact with UAPs, right, and NHI, because that's one of the sources for the data collection, aside from hotspots, right, UAP hotspots like Skinwalker Ranch. So as I started to meet and get introduced to these different types of experiencers or people that can summon UAPs, and develop those relationships, I started to see that this is something that I would have to do to gather more data. So naturally, through the process of building the detector and validating it, I saw that you need access to people who are naturally inclined in these ways. So I cultivated a number of these psionic assets that you can consider. And I look forward to the day where we can put on trials or experimental tests to be able to prove out or to gather data to inform these psionic assets regarding how they're matching up with other psionic assets. And this goes along the lines of a competitive nature of psi abilities. I think there will one day be an aspect of psi games in the future where it will be commonplace for people to talk about their psi abilities in terms of clairvoyance or summoning a UAP or having access to non-local information. And it will be tested and measured and put up against with other people, just the same way like we do sports. And so I hope to help cultivate that community and that framework for having a healthy competitive aspect to psi abilities.
I think it's something that is possible. I've done it myself. And I think that if you're doing it, you need to be in an environment where you're not going to have contamination and not do conferences at 29 Palms.
Yeah.
That's all. It's yeah. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit too much in this community. Hold on right there. Thank you to Chill Farm, Three Sides, Paramarv, and Mama Catherine for the great super chats tonight. Appreciate the love and support, guys. Thank you very, very much. And if you're new, don't forget to hit subscribe, ring that bell. We'll continue on right now. All right, let's kick things off in the second half of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Reminder to all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Final time tonight, scientist David Hooper is with us. He's trying to develop the technology to track UFOs. Can we do it? Is the technology here? I think it is. David, thank you here for being with us. We're going to get to more audience questions here while we got it going. And let's go to Blue Moon here. Do you think there are high-powered binoculars that have video capability, and are they able to do UAP detection?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that, Blue Moon. Well, to answer your question, yes, but you're only looking at one silo or one vertical of UAP detection, right? So to truly have a test bed that is able to conclusively say whether or not something is anomalous, you need multiple data points coming from different sources, right? So it's great that you have video capability coming from high-powered binoculars, but you need to be able to back that up with other anomalous data, right? Coming from a electromagnetic field strength meter or coming from a passive radar, right? So that you can be able to corroborate the claims that you're saying that this is a UAP. Because if all you have is a video of something that looks like a UAP, it's hard to make the determination whether or not that's truly anomalous. You need something to back that up, that claim, right? Something in terms of like velocity data, acceleration data that would come from a passive radar, or time dilation, picking up those effects. So yes, but that we don't end with that. You need more data to be able to conclusively say that it is something anomalous, and that's what I believe that people are going to want. They're not just going to want any video, because we've already seen the videos. We have the videos coming from the DoD that were leaked out, semi-leaked out, but people are not happy with that either. We still don't have disclosure, right? We kind of have disclosure. It's like soft disclosure, but it's not like the super revelatory thing. We're going to need empirical data backing up the claims that, this is anomalous. So yeah, that's my answer.
All right, let's move on to another question here from our audience. Let's go over to, let's see here, Ian in the UK. Any thoughts on NASA releasing UFO footage from the space station?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. NASA has been very strict when it comes to making any claims regarding non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial life. Their whole mission is in search of life outside of Earth. But when it comes to official spokespeople talking about any footage coming from the ISS or from any space missions, right? It's always very, I wouldn't necessarily say like, it just seems like they're not giving us the full truth. Obviously, there's NDAs. People have certain allegiances and obligations with the security clearances, and so there's only so much that they can say without giving us all the goods. So you have to respect that as well. But in terms of disclosure, in terms of disclosing the reality that we're not here alone on Earth, maybe in terms of releasing UFO footage, there are those cams coming from ISSS that are live streaming all the time. And so people have pointed out, hey, there's this weird artifact or this floating thing in space that we see. And people make claims that, this is a possible UAP. But ultimately, there's not any authoritative body saying that. So I think indirectly, there is data coming from NASA that people are claiming there are UAP or UFO footage, but no one's gone on record saying that. So, and it's almost like NASA has not reached that point because they have a certain directive in a sense, at least. And these are my personal speculations. This is nothing coming from like this is fact or anything, but this is just from what I'm witnessing and experiencing. It's almost like disclosure rolled out by NASA has to be done a certain way, and it has to be triggered at certain levels so that it can ontologically pass certain filters for humanity, right? So if you just came out and said, yeah, we have NHI from NASA, that might be really shocking. But if you start to disclose certain levels of disclosure, right? We have life on Mars, right? We have water on Mars, and then we have structures on this one exoplanet, right? We have signatures from exoplanets, and you start to build up to disclosure. It's a controlled disclosure narrative that it's easier to assimilate the public to. And I think that's kind of the drift and the vibes that I'm getting from NASA personnel and the NASA as a whole, rather than coming out and showing us UFO footage. So that's my take on that.
All right, let's go to another question here for you. Let's go to Derek. What's your thoughts on the new quantum imaging photos of the egg UFO?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the quantum imaging photos of the egg UFO. The only thing I am familiar with are the photos that were released by the News Nation special with Jake Barber from the Skywatcher team regarding the recovered egg object. I saw the video. It was it was a green filtered, looked like a night vision video feed from the helicopter point of view, looking downward. My thoughts on that, if that's what you're referring to, because I'm not sure what the quantum imaging was. It's great to see more data come out, right? I'm all about the data. The data is going to help us resolve those questions that we have. And for me, it was cool to see the topic or the theme or the label of the egg aspect of a UAP come up, because traditionally we talk about triangles, saucers, right, tic tacs, but the egg has been kind of not within the status quo, at least as a predominant theme. So now it's making its introduction back in. I thought that was really cool because there are historical accounts of eggs in different ancient texts, especially in Greek mythology. And so I've talked a little bit about that on my X account. And so I think that's super relevant, right? This motif of the egg as aspects of our relationship with the divine. There's an important consideration there that I make in terms of looking at different mythologies from different peoples, from different civilizations, and how plugged in they were with that divinity, right? Today, we have new concepts for the divinity or something that's outside of the human element. We refer to that in a sense. I'm not saying necessarily we refer to that as like non-human intelligences, or at least some people do. And so I think it's making its comeback. It's been talked about before, this egg motif, but now it's being reintroduced. So I think that's really important.
Let's move on to another question. Let's go to Super Crazy. What about a Bigfoot detector? Is this possible?
Why not, right? If we're detecting non-human intelligences and Bigfoot can possibly, totally be within the realm, we should be able to make one. I think it is possible. There's nothing that truly limits us unless we're limited by our sensing capabilities, right? With the human aspect, with our five senses, maybe possibly our sixth sense with intuition and clairvoyance and psi. But even with technological sensors, I think it's totally could be possible. Yeah.
Oh, I need one of those if you develop it, man. I do. I got 2 areas up here that need some investigating.
Yeah, I'll bring my UAP detector up there and check it out.
That would be totally cool. Super Crazy again. Do you think humans or aliens created humanity?
To directly answer your question, yes, but I don't think they created our soul. I think these containers that we inhabit, I subscribe to the hypothesis that we were created here on Earth. Maybe there is some of the existing hominids that were here, and maybe non-human intelligence came to Earth and saw that and took some of their DNA, did some genetic manipulation, created Homo sapiens. That seems to me what my tracking theory is. But I think the very clear distinction where it leaves room for the existence of some type of God or consciousness is that our soul may not necessarily be created by those same aliens or non-human intelligences that created our containers. With that said, that doesn't necessarily throw the baby out with the water regarding the concept of God in the traditional sense, but it leaves room for those interpretations, right? It still gives room for that we're connected to some form of divinity higher than these non-human intelligences that may be physical manifestations of intelligent beings.
Okay, let's go to another question from our audience here. Let's go back to Mama Catherine. What type of halter monitor on people? Pardon me, what about a type of halter monitor on people who are taken regularly?
Dave, can you clarify that? What about a type of halter
Well,
monitor?
like wearing like them I'm fallen and I can't get up necklaces.
Oh yeah. My grandma used to have one of those.
I would assume that's what you mean.
Yeah. No, I'm tracking now. So that's the thing. So this type of device is necessary, right? And we can get into kind of the considerations regarding what capabilities the non-human intelligence or the aliens could have on removing it or turning it off or neutralizing it. But at least to some effect, if you wanted to have some agency, you would want to have some type of device that would collect data while you're having that encounter or that experience, right? If you are being abducted, you would want to empower yourself technologically by having some type of assistive device, right? Analogous to how people who are elderly have some type of emergency button that they can call where an ambulance comes and gets them when they fall. That makes total sense, right? You would want to have some device that would be able to tell you whether or not you've been abducted. Well, the best way to do that would be a time dilation detecting device. And that's where I talk about my use of atomic clocks in UAP detection, where you would ideally want, and this is something that I envision, is you would want a consumer product that you would keep on you that would have embedded into an atomic clock that would be synced with another atomic clock that would be right by your nightstand, right? And let's say you got abducted, well, that device would be with you or on you, or it'd be very hard to take off of you. And the idea is that when you would be abducted, you would have some space-time manipulation, time distortion, and then when you came back, you would be able to measure that, right? It's just being able to collect data on those experiences. I think that's what's needed. The only thing is, though, if these non-human intelligences that are abducting people have the capacity to inoculate human subjects, wipe their memory, usually are reports that missing memory, but they have some recollection of missing time. To what effect is our agency when they can also disable our devices, right? So that's something that we can start to work with and start to engineer ways to circumvent their capacities, but that's just like a cat and mouse game. And so we may start to enter into those territories, but it's going to be an exciting landscape as we start to do that.
All right, let's go to another question here. Let's go to Xanos. Would you use a gravimeter for fluctuations in gravity waves?
Yeah, so my current understanding is those devices are very large and very expensive. They have not at all come down to the level of research grade where someone can buy, even if they're like $10,000. I think they cost millions of dollars, and they require teams to be able to handle those types of systems. So that's the only issue right now. I believe when I went to the Deep Tech Hackathon in Alameda up in San Francisco last year, in around June 2024, I believe. I was speaking to a couple quantum physicists, deep tech founders, and they were talking about how you would want to have some quantum measuring devices, and some, I'm kind of paraphrasing what he was telling me, but there are current scientists working on detecting gravity waves using quantum measuring devices. So as far as consumer products to be able to do that, I think that may be down the ways for a little bit of time, but just having access to those devices is very costly. So it's not like that we can't do it. It's just that the barrier to entry is very high for the average Joe.
Where do you stand on consciousness?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very broad question. Where I stand with it is that, well, I guess I give you a response in this way. An intelligent group of beings that have technology that's able to traverse the cosmos, whether or not they be doing space-time metric engineering, but they can, do instantaneous accelerations. They have these objects that fly in ways that we can't maneuver through our skies. If they're able to do that, then they might have a better understanding in terms of the nature of reality, and that gets directly into consciousness, right? So with that said, a lot of the research and philosophy that I've been following from some authors that I like supposes that and speculates that there may be a technological component to all the things that we consider as woo-woo or paranormal or spiritual, right? At the end of the day, a higher, more highly advanced civilization or a higher form of consciousness views lower forms of consciousness or aspects of reality in terms of lower forms of technology. And I think that's the way I like to frame it. I look at consciousness as technology fundamentally that we just don't understand. And with that said, there may be certain forces within nature that are apex predators that have access to manipulating consciousness. They may not have access to creating it or destroying it, but they can definitely move it around, move that informational energetic structures around that consciousness that I'm referring to. But they're limited, right, by even their technology. So that's where I think there's something primordial and something sacred about consciousness or our soul, and that I think is tied to the originator of the cosmos. That's where my belief structures in God are currently, right? With this understanding of non-human intelligences, UAP, it's hard to frame out my conceptions of God, but I still like to think that I have some cognizant idea of what that could be. It's just hard to frame it, right? But ultimately, whatever we are or being is, I think it's something that I experience, right? And I can see in other people, but it's just hard to kind of like pinpoint exactly what that is because we're observing it, right? We're in it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on consciousness.
Do you believe then that there is a higher aspect that we can tap into, whether it's telepathic, whether it's further along those lines, to try and create communication with the ethereal?
Definitely, right? I think that's what these altered states of consciousness are all about. It's about leaving your body to being able to go back to source, right? And being able to tap into those higher orders of reality, or those higher dimensions that we refer to as that. But ultimately, these states of being that we engage with are states that we have access to. It's just that it's almost like the wool has been pulled over our eyes to be able to access those states. But it's been there all along in different ways. And it's also sort of been subjective to be put in a bad light. Like, hey, don't go there, don't touch that, especially within Roman Catholic theology. They really get you on don't mess with the supernatural. That was my whole upbringing. So I think with psi abilities in particular, right, is it necessarily evil that non-verbal autistic children are able to read minds? No, right? There's nothing nefarious about that. So there's something there that's telling me that whatever these abilities or these altered states that we can engage with is nothing to be scared of. That's my whole thing with that, is that it's removing that label that humans place or authority structures or power structures have placed throughout time. Because ultimately, I think, and this goes back to slavery and ways to enslave humanity, is that if we're able to access that, we're harder to control, we're harder to enslave. And that may be reason why they, or whoever created us, removed that telepathic ability or downgraded that, so it'd be easier to watch Project Earth and Project Humans.
Getting back to the summoning aspect of everything, do you think then that there is potential that the human brain has the capacity to summon objects of the unknown?
Yes, I think this is going to sound super woo woo, but it's that universal field that we're tapping into. Maybe the brain is just some type of transceiver, right? But we're able to, with our human body, tap into that at a higher level, or we're more in tune with it. So I think that's what's going on. We have that innate ability. It's just that it has to be honed in or practiced as a skill. Some are more gifted naturally, but it's something that can be taught. And I think that's what the spectral revolution is all about, which is Jason Giordani's phrase for this reemergence of these psi abilities in the 21st century, and how we deal with that as a human species. So yeah, I think that with regards to UAP summoning, it's something that we can all do, maybe some better than others. But an important aspect with regards to UAP summoning, which is something that I want to highlight, is that we should also make note of the states of consciousness that we're in before we actually engage in the contact modalities, right? Are we altering our perception or our cognition or our consciousness, for that matter, by any hallucinatory drugs, by any barbiturates, right? Alcohol. What type of energies are we in? Are we in a good state? Generally, you want to be in a meditative state, but all those things can affect the contact modality or the effectiveness of that, and some may make it perform better, and some make it worse. So it's an important theme. We talk about the use of drugs in contact protocols. I think it's something that's not talked about because there's a certain attitude that we don't want to talk about, that some people use marijuana while they're engaging in CE5, but a lot of people do it, right? So, and there's other things along those lines that we should start talking about.
What do we need to talk about? We got about a minute to go.
Oh, you want to know the crazy thing? On my Google Home screen, it's a picture of the moon, which I think is a great point to end on, right? I think moving in towards the future as we go through disclosure, right? I don't think of it as any particular singular point, like, oh, this is disclosure. It's definitely like a series of events. As we're presented with new ontologically shocking material, I think it's important that we understand that we have the capacity, we have the agency to affect the nature of reality through our will, right? And the more that we're intentional about our positivity and about our cohesiveness, our coherence regarding disclosure, the better we may have in managing it for a certain outcome. Super woo-woo, but yeah.
Love the woo around here, David. We're going to have to bring you back about that. Coming up next in hour 3, Swamp Dweller, then little Timmy James in the UFO Report. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
All right, David, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight, my man.
Oh, you're
Very
very
much.
welcome for having me.
Hope you had fun.
Yeah, it was great. We got into a lot of different topics.
Yeah, we did. It was so good. It was so
Yes.
good. Thank you very
Do
much
you-
for doing this.
yeah, of course. Do you generally have them at this time? The
Monday
podcast?
through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday we start at 8.
Nice. It was
Yeah,
great. Yeah, I definitely want to refer more people to you. I think this is a great format that you have both radio and you're live streaming to YouTube.
appreciate it. All right, buddy.
Yeah.
You take care.
You too, Dave. Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Dave Hooper, everybody. I'm going to step away, and for Joe, we're just going to put this up on Oh, sweet Robbie. Just for you, sweets. We'll put that back up there. All right. Hi, Canadian Tim.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
I don't know. I'm in a good mood tonight. Aren't you?
Yeah, why are you in such a good mood?
Oh, man. I'll explain here. Remember, we're not talking about the game on the show.
No.
Okay. Because this will air tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I had a great moment with my son.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. Thank you, Serge, for adding to the super chats along with Chill Farm, Three Sides, Paramarv, and Mama Catherine. Here we go. Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Very much appreciate having your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet called Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. It is Salamandroid. Salamandroid is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Let's head to the swamp.
Hello and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Swamp. I'm Swamp Dweller, and tonight I'm going to take you on a mystic journey of the unknown, sharing tales of monsters, legends, and nightmares. Welcome to the Spaced Out Radio Swamp.
Hello there. I've been listening to your program for a while and decided to share this. Maybe another listener has had this happen to them, because I still don't really know what this was. I grew up with acres upon acres of woods behind my house. A farmer owned most of it, but no one paid mind to us. There were huge fields on both sides of the woods, and the farmer at one point had trails going through the woods to move cows from one pasture to the other. My brother, sister, and I would regularly be found playing out there. There was a creek back there too. We could fish or swim, or muck-luck, or whatever you want. Muck-lucking is basically playing in the mud, catching frogs and salamanders. We'd been out there in any weather, any season, in the daylight, in the dark, you name it. I used to hike the woods on moonlit nights as a kid and was quite comfortable in its surroundings. The location of my home was in southeastern Pennsylvania, Chester County. The area still had plenty of open space at the time, and wildlife was really just foxes, raccoon, deer, squirrel, etc. Nothing too scary or aggressive, and the coyotes hadn't come back at this point. I'm about 10 or 11 when this occurred. My friend Haley and I had been hiking for most of the morning and had gone up through the hills, through the woods to the top of the pasture. The trees were less there, and they had these huge vines that we used to make swings out of. We had hung out for a while and then headed back down the hill towards the woods. The day was sunny and clear, and a really nice autumn day. As we entered the woods and made our way to the trail, the clouds started to move in. It got grayer and a little cold. Nothing major. Haley and I were enjoying shuffling through the leaves, and it sounded like the sound of the leaves were being echoed, like we'd shuffle and something would shuffle behind us. I stopped and told Haley that something was copying me. She shuffled forward and said, "See, I'm not copying you." After she shuffled, we heard the leaves move behind us up the hill a bit, and we both turned to see if it was a deer or something else. But what we saw was something entirely different. It was like a man deer or a deer man or whatever you would want to call it. It was coming right towards us. We know how protective they get, and we knew that the buck could get a little gnarly too. So, As we were looking, we hear the lowest growl that made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. Haley grabs my arm and we slowly start backing up. I swear on my mother's grave that we backed up. You could see the leaves moving like something was walking through them, but we couldn't see them actually move. It was only about 30 feet away, and we would move behind trees to try to get a better look while backing up. I was trying to rationalize it in my brain by saying it was just a deer. The leaves moved out of the way of whatever was walking through them, and it was large. It kept coming down the hill just behind us, and the growl came again, louder this time. A growl that rumbled in my chest. We turned tail and bolted it out of those woods as fast as we could, and it felt like this thing was close behind. I can remember Haley falling when we reached the line between the woods and my backyard, and I remember dragging her by the arm until she caught her feet. I was still trying to catch a glance and trying to see if I saw anything, but I still saw nothing chasing us. We ran straight to the house and hid, looking from her bedroom window. We had a clear view from her window to our woods, yet nothing ever came out. We didn't go into the woods for a while, and even so, we only enter a couple of feet before we'd feel like we were being watched. My brother and his friend had a similar run-in, but luckily had their quads. They were further in the woods and were fishing, just like our day. He said it started to get cloudy and colder, kind of out of the blue, and he said he heard someone on the trail further down. This is opposite of where the trail goes from our house. It's deeper in towards a waterfall. He said it sounded like someone was riding their horse down towards them. He called out to them because he didn't want the rider or the horse to get spooked since everything is kind of on a bend. Instead of a voice, a growl was the response. He then said he and Gary didn't waste any time. They left all their tackle and poles and flew home on the quads. I hadn't told my brother about what happened to me and Haley, but I think these occurrences are definitely connected. What do you guys think?
Well, if you want more just like that, head on over to Swamp Dweller's channel on YouTube. Just type in Swamp Dweller and check him on out. He's got thousands of stories there for free. Let's get to the UFO report.
That is an interplanetary flying space saucer. You have made me very angry. Very angry indeed.
Hello, little Timmy James. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. And you, sir?
Oh, I'm in a great mood tonight. Had a great show. Just a great night preparing for this one. It's just a good night all around, my friend.
It is. Most certainly.
I got to say,
Mhm.
there's a conference coming up that we need to talk about.
Yes, it's a summit, actually.
Okay, fill us in on it.
Okay, so this is put on by Ubiquity University, and it'll be happening on a Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific. And what it is, it's free to register, so you can go to ubiquityuniversity.org if you're interested, and I will fill you in on what's going on. So, like I say, starts at 11 a.m. Pacific. Speakers are Jake Barber, Ross Colhart, Bertie Jaworski, Chris Bledsoe, Richard Dolan, Dr. Jim Garrison, Dr. Sean Esjorn Hargens, Sarah Gam, Dr. Pippa Malgren, Bob Grenier, Dr. David Clements, and George Botch. So what this is, it's all about the psionics. So the overview of this summit is with the recent whistleblower revelations of psionic teams using remote viewing in UAP retrieval, summiting UAP and communications with ETs, along with the evidence of mental telepathy being common among autistic children, as seen in the telepathy tapes. The reality of extrasensory perception has reached the mainstream tipping point, right at the moment when UAP disclosure is gaining momentum as never before. So as Jake Barber has put it, outer space meets inner space. The question of consciousness is now front and center in understanding both UAP and how humanity can communicate and interact with non-human intelligence. We are not alone and never have been. The NHI presence on Earth is real, and they communicate through mental telepathy. This necessitates us understanding that our connection to the universal field of consciousness and information is the human condition and is what links us to NHI and other sentient beings. The practice of psionics for the purpose of NHI contact raises spiritual, scientific, and political questions. While remote viewing is an established military technology and CE5 is a known practice for ET contact, new systematic training methods like transdimensional mapping that awakens our dormant ESP abilities or transforming disclosure from ending political secrecy to directly facilitating repeatable, peaceful ET contact without intermediaries. In this summit, we will attempt to shed light on the diverse perspectives of psionics. We'll hear about the history of psychic contact in ufology, how the abduction phenomenon influenced the conversation. We will hear from those with a track record of physically summoning NHI entities such as orbs. We will hear emerging scientific theories on how human beings are able to access PSI abilities involving new understandings of the aether and living energy and consciousness. So join us as we unite experiencers, remote viewers, leading scientists to explore this phenomenon and its profound implications for the future of our species. Register now. So, like I say, it's free. Ubiquityuniversity.org. Should be interesting. That was kind of put together, I think, rather quickly by the looks of it, especially if it's coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, and the popularity of the subject right now, I can see where they're trying to get the information out as well as trying to get the ability to have this conversation. Maybe, I don't know if it's free or not. Is it free?
Yeah, it's free to register. And I actually did the fake register just to see, and there was no credit cards, nothing. Good. Yeah, so first name, last name, and email address, and that's it.
There are some great people on that list. Mm-hmm. There really are some great people on that list. Here's the thing, though, and I just want to put this out there.
Yes.
The conference is being held at 29 Palms.
Mm-hmm.
If you do your homework of what's at 29 Palms, that's where Lockheed Skunk Works is. That's where other Skunk Works programs are.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that they do plan on doing a psionics test in that area at night.
Yes.
Out of all the places that you would hold this event, why would you do it at a site, at an area where there are black ops projects going on? I can think of many other areas to do this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of open sky in Montana, Idaho, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas.
Nevada.
Nevada, you have Area 51 and a lot of military.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I got you.
Okay. But you're going to put this on and claim you are summoning UFOs near a black project skunkworks. To me, that doesn't make sense. There is no sensical thinking in that. And look, I can tell you right now, I believe summoning is real because I've done it myself.
Right.
Okay. I believe it's real. And I believe that they've probably done it. Okay. I'll take them at their word for that, because the emotional speech that Jake Barber gave, you could tell that he actually saw something and did it.
Yeah.
And you cannot convince me otherwise. But what I'm saying about this is if I'm working at Lockheed Skunk Works, knowing that this event is going on, I'm going to play with the people. Say, hey,
100%.
guys, is there any way we could get a drone with some weird lights up in that area?
Mhm.
So when they start summoning, we can throw something up there and screw them up.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not just Lockheed Skunk Works. Other skunk works are in that area as well.
Right.
So to sit there and make this happen, out of all the places you could choose in the United States, there's a lot of big sky country, especially in the Midwest. And you choose Lockheed Skunk Works home base of 29 Palms in Death Valley, California. Explain to me where this makes sense.
It does not. You've got 12, and I'm complimenting. You have 12 very intelligent people, allegedly, in this whole on this summit. And to me, first of all, first thing comes to mind, and it's a weird saying, and a little bit of jiggery pokery, a little bit of shenanigans going on there. My brain goes to that. But when I step out of that, I agree with you 100%. Of all the places, why there? Why would you do that there? And then on top of that, now people that are that believe and are believing in the Jake Barber story and what these people have to say as, I guess, for lack of a better term, as UFO role models and whistleblowers and trying to be legitimate about this and trying to prove a point. I would distance myself from that spot or from that area so far. But when you neighbor up with these guys, I think you give the perception that you're being shifty or there's a little bit of maybe it's not on the up and up. It puts that doubt in my mind anyway. It's like, really? And you're right. Out of all the places, why there? Why
Yeah.
there? It leads to so much speculation, negative speculation, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the Dave 101 coming up after the break. So I
Yep.
don't want to go too much more on this subject. But what else you got for us?
Well, I've got some history for you. So, February of 1959. So, Private First Class Bernard Jerry Irwin, a Nike missile technician, not the shoe company, stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, was driving back from leave in Nampa, Idaho, to his base. So, around 11 p.m. near Cedar City, Utah, he spotted what he thought was a crashing plane. A brilliant light descending towards the snowy landscape. Being a dutiful soldier, he pulled over on Highway 14 to investigate. He left a note on his car. Quote, "Gone to investigate possible plane crash. Please notify state police in about 1 hour." And he hiked off into the darkness with a flashlight. So here's where it kind of gets weird and ironically funny in a kind of a way. So Irwin didn't return. Hours later, a search party found him unconscious in the snow about a mile from his car with no sign of a plane crash. His jacket was oddly draped over a bush, and he was muttering incoherently about a jacket stopping something. No wreckage, no tracks beyond his own, just a knocked out soldier in his skivvies in the freezing Utah night. So he was hauled to hospital in Cedar City, where he slept for 23 hours straight. When he woke up, he was dazed and asking, were there any survivors? As if he'd seen something catastrophic. The story takes a turn that kind of, X-Files territory. Over the next few weeks, Irwin's behavior got stranger. He was transferred to William Beaumont Army Hospital in El Paso, where doctors found no physical injuries, no concussion, no frostbite, nothing to explain his blackout. So psych exam showed no mental illness at all, just a guy who seemed haunted. He claimed a bright object had paralyzed him, and he'd heard a voice saying, "They won't hurt you." Then proof. He woke up in the snow. On March 16th, he fainted again during a routine debrief, landing back in the hospital. By April, he was discharged only to go AWOL, hitchhiking back to Cedar City on the 10th of July, wandering the site like a man possessed before returning to base. The kicker? On August 1st, 1959, Irwin vanished for good, checked out of Fort Bliss, and was never heard from again. No UFO wreckage, no alien calling cards, just a soldier's tale and a disappearance that's still unsolved. The Air Force didn't even bother investigating. No Project Blue Book entry exists, and skeptics later suggest he saw a meteor or a searchlight plane combo, freaked out, and had a psychological meltdown. Believers, though, called it a hushed up abduction, pointing to his trance like state and the missing time. What's humorous about it? Picture this: a gung ho soldier chasing a plane crash only to end up pantless in the snow, babbling about jackets and then pulling a Houdini on the army. It's absurd, yet grounded in real witness testimony. Irwin's own words, backed by the hospital records and the sheriff's report. True? Well, it's as true as any UFO report gets. Documented, debated, and delightfully bizarre. So, February 1959, something lit up Jerry Irwin's night, maybe his life. So, whether it was aliens, a meteor, or just his own mind playing tricks on him.
That was beautiful.
Thank
Beautifully
you.
read.
Thank you, Sal.
Beautifully read, and these personalized stories that you are finding are absolutely great because they really do show that real people are having experiences. And so much we focus on the technology, so much we focus on the government and military side of this subject.
Mhm.
But these stories are very worth repeating, that this is a human issue.
Yeah.
Everyday people are having these encounters, and just like this guy. And it's happening around the world
Yep.
on a daily basis. There isn't a day that goes by that someone is not having some sort of encounter.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because you're right. I've gone down a rabbit hole a bit with this because for me, I think, and hopefully for the audience as well, I mean, that's the most important part, that these stories do connect that way instead of, like you said, talking about, government and blah 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 blah, right? It's just it's refreshing. For me, it's refreshing and it's very interesting, and I can see it unfolding in my head when I'm reading the story. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think so too. I think so too. And, it really also kind of cuts the tension and brings a little spookiness back to the story as
Yeah.
well.
Agreed.
When
I'll
somebody's
have-
got aliens, you got to bring that out, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Oob.
Yeah, you got some aliens? Yeah, we got some aliens. Sure, right there.
And there'll be lots more of these stories to come, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Tim, thank you for coming on in for the abbreviated UFO report. We'll talk to you next week.
You betcha.
And coming up next, with Dave 101 and the weird news of the week. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Spaced Out Radio and your host, Dave Scott.
Right on. Yeah.
Excellent.
So Colby, it was funny because he disappeared when Sidney Crosby hit the post and missed that great opportunity in the second.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, he literally had tears in his eyes.
Oh,
And
no.
I've never seen him do that before. and he I said to Mrs. SOR afterwards, I said, he loves the game now. That was the tale that he loves the game. It like it hurt him. That open net hurt him. So he disappeared for a while through the third, came back out for overtime.
Oh,
And oh, by the way, yeah, let me drink some American tears here. Oh, that's good.
yeah.
That's good. But he came back out for overtime, and when McJesus scored,
Yep.
he jumped off the couch and just jumped right into my arms, right?
Nice.
And he's like, "Dad, we did it! Dad, we did it! We did it, Dad!" And I was like, oh, he's turning out perfect.
Yes.
Turning out perfect.
Yep. It was like when Canada won the gold medal in Vancouver. My kids were over at my place watching it, and I remember that my son was what, 12? Yeah, he would have been 12. And as soon as Crosby came in and did that, my son went absolutely nuts. I remember just sitting on the couch. I mean, we were all jumping around and but I was like, holy cow.
Oh yeah, I remember where I was. I was on my couch downstairs with my dad and my uncle.
Nice.
Oh yeah,
that's
but
awesome.
we saw the passing of the torch officially from Crosby to McDavid tonight.
Yep. No question. No question.
Yeah, the torch has been passed.
Yeah.
Canada is now Connor McDavid's team.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
It was 15 years ago that Crosby did that. That's hard to believe.
Over 5 million Americans watched this tonight, Rob. That's more than the last 12 NBA games combined, just so you know.
Oh. All right, everybody. I'm going to head out, enjoy Dave 101, because I'm going to sit on my couch over here and watch it with you guys. And I will talk to you tomorrow, sir.
All right.
All right. Have a good night.
See you, little Timmy James.
See ya.
Mm-hmm. Kind of makes me feel like we made you guys the 11th province tonight. Bombshell bomber knows. I'll just give you a little look here once. Warden Dragon, how you doing? Christine Lynn, how are you? Let's get going right now, people. Thank you for tuning us in and allowing us into your night. Reminder to all of you that if you've missed most of this show or others, you can always check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. It's that time of the week, that time of the night, where I yell at all of you to get off my lawn. It's the Dave 101.
Open up the door, it's Dave! Who? Dave, D-A-V-E! What is this?
Dave's not here. It's the Dave 101.
I can see you're really upset about this. I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over.
Leave the killer out! Yeah, leave the killer!
It's a mess.
It seems like every time ufology gets on a roll where it starts gaining momentum, it starts becoming popular, it starts getting people asking questions. As soon as we seem to get that momentum, there's always a situation that makes us put our foot in our mouths once again. This time, I'm talking about psionics and this latest symposium that is going on in just about a week's time, 5 days' time, down in California, where Jake Barber and his Skywatchers team are literally going to be putting on an event with speakers, including Chris Bledsoe, Ross Coulthart, Pippa Malmgren, and many others, about the woo side of ufology, from summoning to communication to everything in between. Now, that doesn't sound too bad. It sounds like a great event. But here's where we put our foot in the mouth once again. This event, which sounds absolutely fantastic, and I would love to go if it was within driving distance or flying distance and I could actually get time off. It is literally at a place where it shouldn't be. You see, if you are doing a conference, a symposium, whatever you want to call it, and then you're going to take people outside and show them how to summon UFOs, the last place you do it is in 29 Palms in Death Valley, California, where all of the Skunk Works programs from government defense contractors build their technology. It doesn't make sense. You have thousands upon thousands of free sky and acreage across the Midwest, from Texas all the way to North Dakota, from the eastern part of Nevada right over to Nebraska. The sky is the limit when you look up there. It's a big sky. And yet you choose the place where they are testing hidden technology for the future. Please, somebody break it down like I'm a 4-year-old and tell me how this makes sense. It doesn't. What it does is it makes the idea of psionics or summoning UFOs a joke. Now, I am on the record as saying I believe in summoning. I have personally done it myself. And when you all of a sudden have communication with something in the sky that all of a sudden starts flying over you, flying over your house, doing zigzags, or even doing things at low altitude, you know that you've accomplished something. And I believe that it is possible for people to do this. I even believe whistleblower Jake Barber's testimony that he has done it. And why do I believe him? Because of the emotion that he talked about when these craft appeared after summoning them, or the new term, psionicking them. I just made that up. That's psionicking. I thought it fit in very well. I believe him. So if you're trying to get people who are already extremely skeptical that you could actually perform this, why would you put it in an area where they can absolutely debunk it with something flying out of Lockheed Skunk Works? That doesn't make sense. Why not put it in a captivating place? I don't know. There's a Devil's Tower in Wyoming that seems to have a lot of history with UFOs, namely Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's a lot of sky in Colorado. Sedona, Arizona seems to get a lot of UFOs. Just ask Melinda Leslie. North and South Dakota have big sky. Montana has a big sky. Idaho has a big sky. Nebraska, being as flat as it is, has a big sky. And you're not even doing it during tornado season there. 29 Palms is a hostel for black ops technology. All they have to do, and this is what I do because I like a good practical joke. If I'm sitting here employed by Lockheed Skunk Works and I find out that the Psionic Symposium is going on and they're going to be out at night looking for objects to call down, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, hey, boys and girls, let's have some fun tonight. What do you say we put up one of our drones that nobody knows about, have it lit up a little bit, do some funky light patterns, and fly it over them? Because you know they're going to take credit for that. Instead, all you had to do is move it over one state. Just go to Arizona. It's right there. You'd have been perfectly fine in Sedona or Flagstaff or somewhere in the north. Even move it over one more state. Go to New Mexico. They got some good stuff there. Nice sky. Utah is very nice at this time of year. Very clear skies. Yes, it may be a little bit colder, but you know what? You brave the elements. We're starting to warm up. It's even warming up here. We had snow melt here today. But the point that I'm getting at is ufology and now uapology are famous for shooting themselves in the foot. We are our own momentum killers. We see it all the time where finally we start to get excited about a hearing. And then you get Mike Gold from NASA saying, fund us, fund us, fund us. I don't have anything to add to the UFO story, but fund us. We'll find out. We're NASA. Give us money. Couldn't answer a single question. That shot us in the foot. Arrow shot us in the foot. Many others have shot us in the foot. This is all a big game. And it adds to the games that are being played that we've been talking about the last few weeks on this show. UFOs are real. We know that, especially those who have seen them up close and personal. Alien experiences are real for those who have had the encounters, from contact to abduction. We listen to this because we want to find out the truth about what's going on. The problem is there's so many games being played. It's like a chess match going on, except there are multiple boards being played at once. I don't get why they do this. I don't get why groups like Skywatcher are doing this. It doesn't make sense unless there are ulterior motives to try and prove a point, and they know the flight schedules of what is happening at Skunkworks. Now, if we look at the flight schedules, a lot of these black op places do not fly their craft on the weekends. They don't fly their technology on Saturdays and Sundays and even Friday nights. The reason why? People are off on the weekends. That's why there's the old saying that at Area 51, if you go to Rachel, Nevada, or over to Tonopah, you want to see the weird stuff fly, if you want to hike up Tickaboo Creek, you do it either Wednesday or Thursday. Michael Schratt broke it down like this. I believe it was Michael Schratt, great UFO researcher. Monday and Tuesday are the prep days. Thursday or Wednesday is the run through. Thursday is the flight. Friday is the debrief. Saturday and Sunday are off. I believe that's how it breaks down. That if you wanted to see weird stuff fly coming out of Papoose Lake. Probably not UFO, probably American tech, but that's when the weird stuff flies. They crunched their data on the weekends. Thank you, Henry, in our chat room. Because that's where they get the data from their test flights. The pilots are off because they've done their job. The crew techs have done their job. It's all part of the statisticians now. So does it make sense to have it at 29 Palms? No, it doesn't. Because technically speaking, we don't know their flight schedules. We don't know their crew schedules. We'll never know. But you don't put it in that area in order to keep things going, to keep up the story. And to be honest with you, no insult intended towards Jake Barber or the Skywatcher team, but they deservedly are taking heat over this. Like literally the intelligence community who's wrapped up around them is like, really? You're doing it there? UFO skeptics are like, come on, guys, you got to be serious. Of all places, you're putting it at 29 Palms? Why not just do it in Rachel, Nevada, right by Area 51? You'll get the same result. And like I said, I'm going to reiterate again. I believe in summoning. I totally believe it's real. But in order to prove that they are actually doing this, would you not want to be in a better controlled environment in order to really show people that this is possible? Isolated areas work better. And yet here we are debating whether or not we're going to get any prominent information out of this. Because you know they're going to claim that they've done it, but how do we trust that data now? Now, maybe they have computers or a home base set up there that's the reason why they're doing it there. But if you want to get the public on your side, that what you are doing is real in a highly controversial part of the ufology club, like summoning, CE5, psionics, whatever you want to call it, why would you put it near the black ops bases, all of the skunk works? That doesn't make sense. And this is why ufology continues to fall flat on its face with the mainstream public over and over again, because the skeptics, the debunkers, and the people who just don't believe or have no interest in this subject will eye roll again and again the stupid moves that our community makes to clearly cut down its credibility. And that is your Dave 101. Here is the news.
As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
Loud noises!
I am good at things, fighting and reading the news.
It's time once again for Spaced Out Radio's Weird News of the Week.
Actually going to start off with a cool story here. Scientists have claimed to discover remarkable evidence that points to a soul in the human body that leaves when we die. Oh my, how cool is this? A recent study that looked into what happens when brain activity of clinically dead patients, and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, anesthesiologist and professor at the University of Arizona, has offered his insight into the matter. For the study, small sensors were placed on the brains of 7 extremely ill patients who had just minutes left to live. The complex devices captured each patient's blood pressure and heart before it ultimately dropped to zero and the individual passed away. And as part of the results, the EEG revealed a strange burst of energy that seemed to occur after death. Hameroff told some sources that they saw everything go away, and then you got this activity where there was no blood pressure, no heart rate. So that could be the near-death experience, or it could be the soul leaving the body, perhaps. The professor argues that the motion could be the consciousness leaving the body, while with the expert claiming such is the last thing to go during the dying process. The point is, it shows that consciousness is actually probably a very low energy process, he added. This has been a fairly reproducible event, not 100%, but like 50% of patients show this when you measure it, he states. Researchers stated that in the study that is the most possible explanation for the reading is that the bursts were released because the brain was deprived of oxygen. Speaking about this on the Science Channel, Hameroff said, let's say the heart stops beating, the blood stops flowing, the microtubules lose their quantum state. The quantum information within those microtubules is not destroyed. It can't be destroyed, and it's just distributing and dissipating to the universe at large. The expert continued, if the patient is resuscitated and revived, the quantum information can go back into the microtubules, and then the patient says, I had a near-death experience. If they are not revived and the patient dies, it is possible that this quantum information can exist outside the body, perhaps indefinitely, as a soul. In the groundbreaking study, the team of experts concluded, in our critical care practice, we spend a significant amount of time with grieving families. In these interactions, we have found that the idea that something happens at the time of death is comforting to the families. How cool is that? What if there is a soul? That would be amazing if they could prove that. All right. Now, all of you know I have a fear of sharks. Wasn't going to do this story, but I figured, you know what? Let's just do it. All right. Here we go. So this guy decides to go swimming, scuba diving, actually. All right. And he drops his GoPro in the ocean. That's not a good place. So he goes down to get it. And the next thing he knows, he comes face to face with something everyone would love to avoid. One of the biggest sea predators sneaking up on you. That's how a lot of shark attacks occur, granted, but Some are lucky enough to live and tell about it. There's one viral video that's going crazy right now, happened firsthand to a diver named Johan, who dropped to the depths they were planning to go to, only to get a little nasty surprise. Yeah, posted the GoPro footage on GoPro's official YouTube channel. So they reached their desired depth. They're looking around, having fun, doing what you do in the bottom of the ocean where, great whites swim around. Yeah. And then the great white blindsides them from the left. Now, understandably startled, you could hear the guy screaming underwater trying to get the sea creature to swim away. Johan quickly resurfaces and shouts, "White! White!" Yeah, well, I'm not sure the people on the boat heard it. Now, he wasn't attacked, thank goodness. Okay? Wasn't attacked. But still, this shark was circling him. And this is why I always tell people, if there's salt water, there are sharks. Sharks are beautiful. We kill too many of them. But let's just leave them be in their zone and stop invading their area just so we can cool off in hot water. We say goodnight to all of you. Say hello to Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Call. Rocket is watching. My brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Space Now Radio. Rocket is in and out here to the show. Get your horns up, the guitar, God itself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, in your car, at work, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, Elgin, Facebook, Stream, LinkedIn, Space Travel Club, and others. I know you're out there somewhere. Remember, this show is copyright by Space Now Radio and its Marketing Adventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your people with us. Because together, my friends, make a mistake. We're watching. The ultimate night. Mr. Bumblefoot. Do we need a favor? Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night, but soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got them too. Good night, everybody. All right. Let's get this thing done, eh? By the way, speaking of the hockey game, okay, this is before the hockey game. Do yourself a favor, my American friends and Canadian friends, and all of our international listeners. Now, I don't know the lady's name, but I know she was up for like 3 Grammy Awards. This lady who sang the U.S. national anthem at the hockey game tonight was literally one of the most beautiful renditions of the Star-Spangled Banner I have ever heard. She had a orchestra behind her. You add in the 20,000 patriotic Americans who were at the game singing along every word with her. And her voice, oh my God. Honestly, it reminded me of the amazing job at Super Bowl that Whitney Houston did. This was absolutely incredible. And I really hope that the Super Bowl and the NFL actually take note at how beautiful an anthem the United States of America has. And when it is sung perfectly, not with all this Mariah Carey going off on tangents bullshit, okay? But when the American national anthem is sang beautifully, it is one of the most incredible anthems ever. Like, I love O Canada. I get choked up for O Canada, but I can tell you this. When I go to a hockey game or I go to any sporting event and the U.S. anthem is played, I do sing the Star Spangled Banner because of my respect and love for my American family and friends. But if actually, no, the Canadians did not boo, but the Americans booed our anthem tonight, which I thought was, well deserved. Right? So what I'm saying is, if you go listen, do yourself a favor and go listen to that national anthem tonight. I wish I could play it on here for you, but due to the idiocy of copyright infringement, I can't. But do yourself a favor and watch the national anthem tonight. And if you don't get choked up over that, I don't know, you have no emotions. Because even I was like, oh my God, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So make sure you check that out tonight after the show. All right. Feb 2025. Yeah, do yourself that favor. We got booed because a bunch of idiot Canadians had been booing the U.S. national anthem recently at hockey games and basketball games because of the threat of tariffs and everything. No, that had nothing to do with hockey. Rob, I can't wait to bring you a hockey stick down to Vegas. Fast heavy. Dave's hair looks like it's trying to eat his head. That's funny. Who's on the show tomorrow? Whistleblower Jason Sands tomorrow night, by the way. That'll be fun. Give me 2 seconds here. Hey, Sweets, just so you know, I'm gonna have to redo my commercial audio here soon. So just wanted to let you know, I might need a hand in transferring it over to Radio DJ. It's been 31 years, Derek. I'm gonna redo it all. I gotta bring the tones down a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of that bleeding of audio when I talk over the music. And I think if I bring the levels down a little bit, it would actually work better. No, I'll recut them. I'm going to recut the audio. Oh, I know it's a StreamYard thing. It's driving me nuts, though. It really is driving me nuts. Yeah, even on the radio end, it's a little hot. So on the radio side, it needs to come down a little bit. Astral Fugitive, how you doing? All right, so let's get this party started. Yeah, Data, we can't do that though, right? The only way we could get around that is if we decided to cut the intros down a little bit and cut those intros down from about where they are now. If we cut them out to about 22 seconds. Oh, you'd still have bumper music for sure, but I just got to tone it down a little bit. It's too loud. I got to get those scissors sharpened. They used to be so sharp. Does anybody really sharpen scissors? That's so old school thing to do. Imagine how many scissors get thrown out every year because nobody sharpens them. That is an accurate NSX. River Dogma brought that to me in Vegas a couple years ago because he knew that I mentioned once that it was my favorite car growing up, and he's like, "Hey, dude, I got you a present." I'm like, so I put it up. It's a blue Acura NSX. Reminder to all of you that if you're in the San Francisco area, coming up that first weekend of April, you could go to UFOCon 2025. Get your tickets there. I will be attending. Oh, those tears taste good. No, I have not yet, Derek. All right, everybody. Tomorrow night on the show, once again, Jason Sands, whistleblower, will join us. I want to say a big thank you tonight to Chill Farm, Search and Destroy, Three Sides, Paramarv, and Mama Catherine from the great Super Chats. We're all going to Vegas May 1st to 5th at the Orleans. Come join us. Come hang out. Many of you are. And we'll talk to you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.